Merry Christmas. Unless you're in Vision Esports, pay people, please. It's 2023. This man deserves his cut of the pay. It's Crimzo. Crimzo's here to talk about flex supports. Also talking about life after Overwatch. Thank you for coming in and speaking with us and hanging out for a little bit.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for reaching out and letting me know.
Yeska, are you ready to wave your hands in the air and move people around mid-show?
Yes, absolutely. Like I'll be honest, I haven't set my first yet. But the bottom tier is awful. Like I don't know how to move people around in there. There are some categorization troubles. What's the flex support, I guess, especially in Overwatch 2?
That's true.
How much do you want to wait? Performance in Season 1? That type of stuff, right? But yeah, I feel like this was not the most challenging list, but it still wasn't easy.
It always feels like the top half is like, okay, I know like who I want to name, and then the order kind of becomes the question, and then the bottom half is like, bro, you could put a lot of people here, and you'd have an argument. You've got a dog in the fight. You just gotta argue it well. So it's that bottom half that I feel like every show is always a little bit tougher. But we are going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what's going on with Crimzo, what's going on after Overwatch, all that good stuff. But before we go into that, we do have to thank the people who make this show possible, the Patreon producers, the people who support the show. If you can't support the show monetarily, do all that influencer stuff, like, subscribe, download the podcast, comments help too. All that helps the algorithm based. God bless the algorithm. But episode 327 for Flex Supports is brought to you by Battlecry, Refine, Bean, Bronzebot, Boohow, Volshin, Rexane, Volumel, Sugar High, and our YouTube members, I am DRW, Brother, Adam L, Isam Gel, Fire Element 6, and AK. Crimzo, retirement. Talk to me. We're done.
Well, it was a long season, long career. Just kind of got to the point where I wasn't really enjoying the game too much. Feeling the need to kind of like work on my personal life because, as when you're a pro and you're traveling every year and you're on different teams and all that for like 8 months out of the year, it's hard to kind of like keep up with your personal life, and everything kind of gets put on pause. But now I'm 24. I've had 4 years with my girlfriend. Like it's time. I feel like it's time to kind of move forward, and especially like with the uncertainty of the future, it feels like a great time. Obviously, I'm still like open to like going through collegiate or like becoming a coach in the future at some point. So I'm not like completely closing the door, but definitely prioritizing kind of like myself right now.
I think that's a noble cause after, a lot of people forget being picked up on the ladder, doing like the pre-Overwatch League stuff through like Contender Season 0 and whatnot. Been around, kicking around for a long time. Long career. Seeing it all. And then some. Everybody wants to talk about punks fighting through the gulag. Boy, howdy. Crimzo, I feel like you've fought through some too.
Oh yeah,
you had to be rezzed a couple times. You gotta get the money cash bags, whatever these Call of Duty kids are doing these days.
I've got plenty.
You got some war stories, right?
Plenty of stories, plenty of experiences. It wasn't all bad, but
sure, of course,
there definitely was some bad. There was some good. It was a crazy 4 years. I would say that.
We were kind of talking a little bit before the show, and you're like, yeah, I don't have any scrims, I'm kind of free. Is it weird saying that because of how like regimented these last like 4 or 5 years have been?
Yeah, I mean, usually around this time, everybody would kind of like know what's happening for the next year. Like, what team you're on, like when your flight's going to be, you kind of like are like mentally kind of prepared for like that when that happens. But right now it's just like, oh man, I got so much free time. I'm just chilling. Like, it's nice. It is nice to have like that free time to kind of, do whatever you want. But at the same time, scrimming is always going to be fun. Competing is always going to be fun. So I do miss that a little bit, but I also just enjoy having time off and just relaxing.
It's a different life.
Yeah, I mean,
can't imagine.
You were also like one of the more well-traveled Overwatch League players, right? Like having been in 4 teams, I think it was, right? Over your time, I don't think there are too many players that have cracked the 4.
I really wanted to go for the 5 for 5. Become the world's first 5 team player.
5 jersey haver.
I don't think there's a 5-team player.
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
4 is hard. Like, even like playing for 4 years is like that's a pretty small list, but 4 different teams.
Yeah, I was trying to collect like the Infinity Gauntlet of teams, but I'm one short, unfortunately.
I mean, it depends on how you count, because striker otherwise and some counting measures, it's getting close, right, with the bounce back.
He'd break it anyways. Let's be honest.
Every striker bounce back is like half. It's like half. Like he's been bouncing back so much, he's got like 2 full years on each team, pretty much.
Yeah.
I will also say, just looking at the pattern of your careers, it feels like every other year you got a dumpster fire, and unfortunately the next one would have been the year. So like Paris Eternal maybe next, or rather Vegas Eternal next year or something. Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe dodged a bullet.
Maybe.
Did it feel like this was maybe the best team environment you've been in this year?
Oh, without a doubt. I think without a doubt. I'm not even 100%. I know, like, I've heard things about other teams, and I'm not like 100% on like kind of like what what's going on behind the scenes with each team. But I really think that like our team this year had the best environment outside of the game, and I don't think it's close. I think the way that we were able to kind of like hang out and bond together, and just like have like a general understanding of kind of like what we want to do and how like we want to like proceed with, kind of like how we want to play. I think. It was such like a nice year. Like it felt so relaxing. There wasn't any like super crazy things that happened. There was one, but like, overall it was just a great year. I loved living in Vancouver. It was so amazing. But yeah, I mean, we were super chill. We knew coming into the year that we wanted to be like much more like relaxed because me, Ascoff and Punk and Faith just came off of Boston, which was a very stressful year. So we were really kind of like focusing on, just kind of like taking it easy, kind of like obviously like not like slacking or like not doing our jobs, but like just like relax, like have fun playing the game, enjoy each other's like company, like enjoy the moment. And I think for the most part that was pretty much kind of like what happened. Like there was so many times that like after scrims we would go outside, we would play basketball, we'd play like tennis, we just like hang out with each other, we'd like drink together. So it was just an amazing year, and it was actually like I really enjoyed it.
It's good because it feels like the more information disseminates out from the league itself, and people are sharing more and more stories, the more it like. I think Gator talked about this on the Uncoachables podcast, so like Unturn them, but like the fun aspect, and obviously this is a job at the end of the day, so like the fun factor is probably gonna be a little limited, but it felt more like kind of combative a lot of the times. Like more of these stories are coming out where it's just like, yeah, everybody's just like they want it so bad that like people are really starting to like butt heads, and like they it's hostile. And that Vancouver like environment seemed like it was very much not that, and like you guys kind of like chilled. Do you think that kind of like benefited you guys in the long run?
I think for a lot of this season we did pretty well in terms of like, I mean, obviously like the season itself, like overall we did pretty well. I think that towards the end, I think it did maybe kind of bite us in the ass where we weren't like putting in as much effort as the other teams. Okay. Because that was kind of just like the idea of like the environment is just like we're gonna have fun, we're gonna chill, we're not gonna like completely like do nothing, but we're like we're just gonna like have a good time. And so like towards the end of the season, especially like in play-ins, I did personally kind of feel like the lack of like preparation, and kind of like reviewing. So that is something that I wish we took a little bit more seriously towards the end. And there was times where like I would try to kind of like coordinate like reviews myself, because like I felt like it was important to like get these things down, because obviously we're going into the play-ins, it's like the end of the year, everybody's trying really hard, teams are reviewing very hard, so we need to be able to kind of like match that in some sense, because like the problems on our team is not really like talent wise. Like I feel like talent wise, like we are very much like competent, like we can take on like a lot of the teams. I just think that it's important to always kind of like stay on the same page. And sometimes that's a little bit hard to do when you're not kind of like reviewing and talking about things all the time. And then especially when we had Heesang doesn't speak much English.
Right.
And our general like plan for him was to just kind of like let him play the game, let him have fun, because he is a very good player. It's just
Mhm.
it seemed like he was like just there was too much pressure on Shock, and he kind of crumbled. And
Yeah.
so like we just had the mindset to like let him play the game, let him have fun, do whatever. But obviously since he doesn't speak too much English, it's hard to coordinate. So that's why like reviews especially would have been pretty important. But yeah, I think that's kind of just like how things went. I think towards the end it did kind of bite us in the ass in my opinion.
Okay.
But overall the entire year was really fun. I really enjoyed it.
Can I ask a selfish question? You talk about how like he's saying that the MO with he's saying towards the end was like, let him just kind of have fun and play his game.
Yeah.
I vaguely remember, I think it was that first Defiant head to head in the upper bracket finals and in the play-ins, long series. Was that not like that series where like he's saying he's running on these like big soldier flanks? Was that kind of just like him doing his own thing, or was that something that you guys had kind of like prepped?
Well, it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
We told like he kind of like can do whatever he wants. We can like tell him kind of like what we want him to do, but then it's
Okay.
like up to him to kind of like interpret that and do whatever
Sure.
he wants. So we can tell him like, oh, he's saying go for flank or something like that, and he'll
Yeah.
like go. But pretty much we would like push him a little bit to like do what we kind of like wanted or like what we needed from like a macro sense, but
Mhm.
for the most part he was just kind of like doing his own thing, playing his own game, kind of like rank like super plus ranked mode
Yes.
for him. But I mean it kind
It
of worked.
worked. It was
Yeah.
super successful. It was so annoying. Like I remember like looking at those VODs and like trying to see it from like a top-down perspective. I'm like, bro, this has to be so fucking frustrating for like Hydron and like their sports like coming back off rotation, like on push when you're trying to like rotate to all these different points, and he's saying just could be behind that dumpster or just could be behind you and spawn, like just constantly being a nuisance. Like, and it was it was kind of successful too.
Yeah, and he's saying especially like he was such a hard grinder. Like he would constantly just always be playing ranked until like 4 a.m.
Jeez.
Just like constantly playing the game. Like even there was times that like we'd go out like as a team and we want him to come and he's like, no, I'm playing ranked.
Gotta grind.
And so like he's just a hard grinder. Like obviously like his mechanics are really amazing. Yeah, he's just a great player. Obviously, there was language issues there.
Sure.
We did have Faith, who was pretty much bilingual. So like if we really had to say something to Heesang, we would use Faith as kind of like the bridge to kind of talk to Heesang. But for the most part, he's just kind of doing his own thing, playing the game. He's usually like doing really well. But yeah, it's kind of what's going on there.
Huh. Interesting. Faith, another name that kind of pops up quite a bit. And any team with Broy. I know Broy, big fan of the Faith god himself, the main support phenom. You mentioned him being like a super like positive, not positive, but like super nice person. I think in the AMA recap that I saw that you brought him up a couple of times. Any fond memories of Faith?
I think Faith is like he's probably my favorite teammate I've ever had.
Okay.
I really enjoy working with him. I think he has kind of like an issue where like he can't really like flex too much off of the main support heroes at all.
Sure.
And he like kind of like lacks aggressiveness. But at the same time, like that's something that like I like to do. I like to be pretty aggressive when I can. So like it's a good like kind of like compliment for me to kind of like have someone that's a little bit more like reserved. And I can kind of like work off of that, and we kind of like try to find a nice balance. But I think as a person, he's just such a nice guy. Like I've never ever had any issues with him. He kind of acts like the clown, the team clown.
Okay.
In the sense that like he kind of acts dumb. But he's much he's much smarter. Like he's not dumb. He's kind of acts like a child sometimes.
Okay.
So it's pretty funny. But he's always been such a nice guy. Never had any issues with him at all. He's definitely like a great person to have like on your team, no matter what kind of like situation it is. He's like always gonna work really hard. He cares a lot about the game. He's got the passion to improve. Just a good guy overall.
Hell yeah. Love to hear it. Love to hear about success stories and guys having a nice little, end of season wrap up and, capping off a solid run there. Obviously, a rank star yourself coming up, you kind of a little bit of your origin story. Kind of reset mindset wise, back to like the beginning of the season, the team's forming, Sugar Free gets signed. It's like, oh shit, like, this is the big season. Been out for a year. Overwatch 2 is a different game. Is he going to show up? Is he going to be as good? Did you have any kind of like reservations there? You're like, bro, I've playing against this kid since he's like 12. Like, he's in diapers and just like smurfing on everybody on Genji. Like, he's legit. Like, trust. Like, was there any kind of like, what did it feel like to kind of start that season there? Those first couple scrims.
Well, I'll tell you right now. When I first talked with Ascoft about joining the team was pretty much already set. It was actually going to be Faith, myself, Punk, Aspire, and then it was actually going to be Shax as the second DPS. And the idea behind Shax was in the year before in Boston, when we had a little bit of a segregation issue during the Junker Queen meta, where our team, like the white boys, were just benched, the Westerners. We formed a scrim team with the benched guys from London, and Shax was part of that. And so we kind of saw a little bit of Shax and kind of what he brings when we were on that team. And so the idea behind Shax, being on our team from the beginning, was that he was going to actually try to become more of a projectile player. And apparently, we had talked to Shax, and he wanted to do that. He was interested. He wanted to try. I don't know how that was going to go. But that was the initial plan. And then at a certain during that time, that's when all the weird pushbacks were happening, and the delays and the contracts and all that. So a lot of things kind of got messed up for a lot of teams. And because of that, Lenny Sugar Free was available to sign. And I remember Ascoft asking me oh, Sugar Free's available. Do you think we should sign him? And I was like, yes, absolutely yes. You should do everything you can to sign this kid, because he's insane. He's insane. I know he's been out of the game for a long time, but I played with him before. I played against him before. I think he's a really good player. He's an actual he plays the projectile characters that we need someone to play, and not more of a project. And so I thought as soon as I heard that he was available, I thought we have to get this guy, and if we do, our team is going to improve a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everybody coming into the season had a fair. Anybody who's well, we'll see. Obviously super hyped up and has a storied contenders career. Playing with the ATL lads and whatnot. But we'll have to see what he looks like. A year out. New game. In the big league, it's a different caliber up here, and fuck me if this kid did not just absolutely come in and just large man everybody, just actually just dominant in some of these games, and even in some of those early scrims. Obviously, preseason was kind of a leak fest, if you will, and looked phenomenal there. And I think that kind of built the excitement and just kind of took it and ran with it.
Yeah, he was supposed to get signed to Glads before all the delays and weird stuff that happened, and they really messed up by not signing him. I was actually so surprised that if they had Kevster Sugar Free DPS line, that's an insane lineup. And yeah, I think another good thing about Lenny is that he's a very he's very go with the flow. He'll kind of listen, and he's not he doesn't have a huge ego. He's not a super stubborn person. He's very go with the flow. He'll do if you ask him to do something, he'll do it. He'll try it. And I love that about him. And I think he's just a really good player. He was out of the game for a while. But he picked up right where he left off, and I think he was pretty dominant.
Yeah, I'd say so. I'd say bringing it home for some Western Overwatch enjoyers, just another name to put up there on some dream teams. And yeah, that's a bit of a fumble, but those delays were, I think, probably shuffled quite a bit. I know Yiska probably can comment there that whole lot of cards got shuffled around and those early preseason scouting reports and team builds.
Yeah, Gator even said that he offered Sugar Free.
I always just assumed that that's where he was going to land. It was just oh, come on, he's going to go to Atlanta. If he ever comes back, that's that's his crew. He's played with those players before, knows some of the staff now. Why wouldn't you? And
there is a world where I'll leave open to interpretation what this means. But if Sugar Free goes to Atlanta, Dallas wins the league again.
Huh.
I feel like there's a strong possibility that that happens, based on just like how the chips fell in the end.
Mm.
Yeah, from my understanding, Lenny just didn't want to be benched. Like he wanted to play the game.
Right.
Yeah.
He heard about the roster they were bringing in. Yeah, like that's an amazing roster. But at the same time, like he's
I
been
want
out of
to
the game
play.
for a
Yeah.
while. He wants to play. And I totally understand that. And hey, good for us.
Worked out for you, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, what a year! What a year. Jessica, anything from the Titans? I'm not gonna completely gloat. Did win a bet, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, fair play. I think it's not even really a thing where you could realistically say you got lucky with the meta, just simply because like tanks are so important, right? And
yeah,
it wasn't necessarily Punk's meta. So like I feel like, do you feel this like this was probably not the best meta you guys could have hit, and you still hit top 5?
I actually think the Monkey Tracer Sombra and a Brig meta was like really good for us.
Okay.
I think the reason why, I know that Punk's not like a traditional main tank player, he's not really like a Winston player, but another good thing about Punk, very similar to Lenny, is like he's very go with the flow. He'll try things, he'll listen, and like we'll try things together, right? And that was obviously like that's a huge part of our team, is like we'll talk about things with each other and we'll try them, and like we won't like stress too much about like what's perfect, what's the best thing. So like we'll try things, we'll see what works. But I think like looking across the board with the other heroes, like myself on Ana, that's by far my favorite hero, best hero, and then Faith on Brig, by far his best hero, his favorite hero. Lenny on Tracer and Sombra, he can do both. He's very good at both. And then, when we had Aspire, he would also like fill in the other hole, and they can both kind of like do both, I think. And then Punk on Monkey, he was really smart. He was really smart at like, how to kind of like engage and like what he had to do, and he improved a lot. Like his rate of improvement was probably like the biggest out of like any of our players. I think he like towards like the end of that Monkey meta, he was actually like doing really, really well. And I can obviously like see and tell that because I'm the Ana player. I'm like the one that's
Sure,
like watching out for him all the time. And like I see him, I'm like, oh shit, he went in, he probably killed 3. Like, oh shit, this guy's serious. But I think that meta was actually really good for us. We were all pretty comfortable, I think, towards the end. So yeah, I think the meta was pretty good.
What about the play-in meta?
So the play-in meta. So okay, so against Toronto was playing the weird double flex, Allari BAP stuff. So we had to find some sort of solution to that. And at the time we were still like trying to like play a lot of dive. So initially we started like with the like Ana, Genji, like Orisa or Zarya and stuff like that. Like we would try to basically like enable Lenny and get nanoblade rotations and stuff like that. So we would try to do that, and then that didn't really work out. So then eventually we ended up, we became like a rush team pretty much. We copied kind of like what Boston was doing with the Bash and Genji, and we would play that way. And this is why kind of like what I was talking about earlier, where we're not really reviewing too much, kind of like bit us in the ass, was obviously like when you go into a rush meta, it's much more kind of coordinated, and you have to kind of like understand your win conditions and like what you're going to do as a team, and kind of it's much more like team focused. And because we weren't reviewing so much, it's much harder to kind of like be on the same page about things. So like that meta, I think, was worse for us because of that, because we didn't review as much as I think we should have. So that's why I think that meta was worse.
Kind of comes down in these metas because it does feel like even some of the coaches and the players now are kind of differentiating like almost player styles. Like, oh, they're a great like rush player, and it almost kind of feels like they're talking about like, oh, they like trade resources well, or like they're very like they coordinate with their team extremely well. They're not trying to be like the all-star like hero, like I gotta do extra for my team, I have to like try to make a play. Is that kind of the vibe there, where it was just like we every little resource wasn't min-maxed out, everything wasn't necessarily like perfected, let's say?
Yeah, I think that was a little bit of the issue. I think yeah, we didn't really review too much. We didn't really talk about like the importance of like old cycling and like
Mm,
planning and all that stuff. So like especially like in a rush versus rush, it's very like the smallest details are what makes the biggest difference. And obviously like
sure.
London are like the perfectionists where they've played rush for so long, they've talked about it so much, they know kind of like all their win conditions and all that. So like it's really like the smallest details, and like that's the stuff that needs to get talked about in reviews and kind of like ironed out. And because we weren't doing too much of that, that's kind of like where like the flaws started to show, for us.
Fair play. Yeah. London out here running like crazy if then statements with sim TPs and apparently flipping the scrim meta on Gibraltar. Now apparently everybody's just running Ryan all over the place. God
Yeah.
bless.
No,
Thanks,
I don't
Chris.
think anybody can do it like them though. They got that down. Like that is their comp. I think they probably, if I'm thinking about all the teams that have qualified for playoffs, they're like the one team that nobody wanted to qualify for
I
the
bet.
playoffs
Yeah. Just I
because
don't give me London.
playing against them is just such
It's a
a
different
headache.
game, right?
And like even like during the year, like there were so many teams that like just did not want to scrim them. They would like be hard blacklisted because they would always be like when they played dive, they were awful. Like they were just
Sure.
the worst team ever. But obviously when they go back to like their comfort and what they know, like they were like really, really good. And there was a lot of times where I think that they even like struggled to people like didn't respect them.
Mm,
But I always kind of like admired them for kind of like sticking to their guns and like doing what works for them, even though it's not good for like, even if it's not like what's quote unquote meta. I've always admired them for that, and I think like they deserve that the success that they've had.
100%. Out here just running the style. I always think that's the one thing that I feel like Overwatch didn't have enough of, and I hope that maybe we get going into 2024 is like these like super stylistic teams because they're fun to like root for. You have like everybody kind of running similar stuff, maybe some differing opinions here and there, but you don't get too many like Chengdu Hunters back in the day or like EU contenders and like oh yeah running like just weird one tricks off the ladder and just kind of like making shit up, or London running Rhine on traditional like dive maps. Like those are the ones where it's just like, what? How is this working? Why is this so successful? Such a surprise. It's just, it would be fun to see more of that. It'd be fun to have some wackiness, but
Yeah,
calculated, good wackiness.
I feel like you always hear kind of like play to your
Yes.
strengths and all that, but I mean London definitely took that and ran with it all the way to the playoffs.
Honest to
Um,
God, yeah.
And there's really, yeah, like you said, there's not many teams at all that like do that at all anymore.
It's hard.
Yeah, it is hard. You really need to be bought in. Like you have to be
Mhm.
100% bought in to like the idea that we're not like it's so hard to play something different and then
Yeah.
lose with it and then see what the other team is playing and like think like, oh man, we should just play that, or we should just
Mhm.
mirror like all that stuff. Like you have to be fully bought in and understand that this is the best thing that we have going for us. This is what we're gonna make work. And like a lot of teams just like don't. It's really hard to come by,
Yep. Yeah.
to get that kind of like trust. So it's really rare to see, and that's why I'm saying like I'm glad to see London succeed because it's so rare, and I think they deserve it.
Yeah. I feel like this permeates throughout most esports where it's just like, everybody comes into a new patch with all these ideas and then like one person, I feel like Iska, you can probably support this with way more evidence than I can, but like everybody just like sees what works and then they're just like, well, obviously that's just the best, so we should just be doing that. Don't ask me why it's the best, but like it's super successful. Did like that felt oppressive, right? In scrims, like we should just do that. Like we need to unpack that and figure that out and not really figure out who we have as players and what they're super strong at. And even sometimes as a player, it's got to be tough to be like, fuck, man, maybe we do just have to play Torb. Like I don't know that I want to, but shit, maybe it's good. You just got to try it out.
Yeah, the game theory is like it's not just a state of balance as we always preached. It's a social construct just as well. Who scrims who's the Genji player that pops off and heaves the comp like to higher heights than it probably deserves on an objective meta level. Who gets to practice against who and invest in there, right? Like it's also like the risk factor of willing into a comp where you don't know if at the end of the road, when you're well practiced on it, if it works against the current meta comp, also on the uphill battle that nobody will scrim you, it is a gamble that I usually have, like, would probably suggest to the lower ranking halves, because you're losing anyway, right? But I think like crucially for London, they sort of like took that on when it was good, and then they always kept like a steady level where they probably always sort of could have made it work to never be like, you know, one of the last 3 teams or whatever. If they had just consistently played that in almost every meta state. Yes, sometimes balance gets really wacky and they have a problem, but or you know, I guess there were seasons where you couldn't play every hero that you wanted, but barring those outliers, I feel like if you have meta comp knowledge that exceeds everyone else, especially at the bottom level, it's really hard to be last.
Yeah, I think that, like, especially the teams at the bottom, like, I'm sorry, but you're probably not going to beat Lip and Stalker in a Tracer Sombra mirror.
No, you're not.
I'm just, just an idea. So like, that definitely, like, sometimes you gotta take the risk. You gotta take the gamble. I think some teams are like really just like scared of that, and I think it should be something that is seen a little bit more, especially like from these lower tier teams. Like, go for something crazy, go for something weird, like talk about it, like try to like find out a way to play against, kind of like find out a way to play against the meta instead of like playing into the meta where like it's just obvious that you're so behind that you're just not going to succeed. And that's what London did, is like they tried to play dive, they tried to be a little bit more flexible, they got absolutely shit on, so that they went back to Rein, right? So they tried to be more flexible, and that's important. I think it was really good for them to obviously pivot back to the Reinhardt, not like keep going and like ramming their head into the wall. At some point you got to kind of like admit defeat. So yeah, I think that's definitely something that should be seen a little bit more, in my opinion, too.
Always feels like it circles back to like that GOATs debate. Like, do you keep practicing it to try to chase up the rat race of it, or do you try to break what's going on and try to like, get back to playing Overwatch in that way? And it's not easy. It feels very easy looking in, I would imagine, but as like a player, as a coach, as somebody working in and around teams, it's probably really difficult to kind of zoom out and see all of that and try to make it up as you go. I feel like we do kind of say play to your strengths very often, but like when you have a hard time deciphering what your strengths are because everybody's just playing the same kinds of things, like that's a tough question to ask, a player. Like, what do you think about the meta? So like, I don't know. I've spent 16 hours in the last, day trying to figure out like where and when I should pack on Brig. In a Brig mirror. Like, I don't really know. My brain's fried. Like, I don't know how to just make shit up. I feel for you guys. It's tough.
Yeah, it's definitely like honestly, it's a big mental thing. Like, you have to be able to be like willing to fail and willing to take risk, to be able to like actually like pull these things off. And just obviously just most of the time it's just not something that people are kind of willing to do. They'd rather just like play the meta, play worse, lose, and then blame their teammates, because that's kind of like how things feel like they kind of go. And sometimes like people at the same time, like I think like if you want to like mirror these like better teams, like it has to be like from the point of like learning and like improving that way. So like if you want, like, there's, in my opinion, there's 2 different things you can do. It's like either you can mirror and try to learn and like improve that way, or you can like fully take the gamble and like understand that you're not really going to learn and you just want to win. And then at that point it's about, how do we beat this comp? How do we, like, what can we do to kind of like get the edge on like the other team? So that's kind of like a thing that I think some people maybe have an issue with, kind of like deciphering as well. It's like, do we want to like learn and like play the meta, or when do we have to like change to like, okay, we got to start winning? I think London found a pretty good baseline for that, where it's like, at some point they really just like, they pulled the cord completely. They said, we're going back to Rein. Obviously not every team has that kind of like,
of course,
ace up their sleeve. But anyways, the idea of like pivoting and when things are not working is like a very smart thing, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of like I would imagine it's also kind of a little bit of an ego hit as well, where it's just like, okay, we have to admit to ourselves that we're not, we're not proper. We're not like the best players ever to ever grace the game. We're not, we're not gonna be good at this meta because we just don't have the pieces for it. We have to accept that and move on from it, and that's tough. That's a hard pill to swallow, to be like, yeah, this isn't gonna go super well. So we need to figure out, like, we need to find a gap here and try to figure out some kind of success and salvage it. You'd think it'd be easy, but that's not easy to get people that are competitors to kind of buy into. And I think that circles back to what you were talking about, like the trust in London, the trust in those like super stylistic teams. You're gonna find that's probably pretty correlative, I would imagine. A lot of trust there, a lot of buy-in.
And I think like it all starts from the top, right? It all starts with like the coach and kind of what the coach kind of like the respect that the coach has from like the players, to like make those kinds of like decisions and kind of guide the team. I think that's something that's also very rare. I think it's something that London does have because they've worked with Christopher for a while. They trust him, but at the same time, it's like you need to have somebody at the head of the ship that's gonna turn the ship, and then everybody's with the head of the ship, and they're going that way too. And that's hard, like especially like when you're talking about like mixed rosters too. It's like completely different ideas about the game and like ways of approaching the game. It's just really, really hard.
Yeah. It's completely different ideologies, like you said, the way that you view the game. I feel like as esports fans like get more and more ingrained, the more that you start to hear about like the players that want to play at the peak level. They're like the best case scenario, like this is how the meta should be played. Let's chase after like optimal gameplay. That's the word. Versus like, more realistic. This is, and I feel like that's where you get those styles. So it is as much as it's, the hands of the players in the server, it's also like the almost like attribute sheets of all of the players, the pros, the cons, what they can do, what they can't do. You kind of have to RPG it out a little bit sometimes, and it's far harder than I think people want to admit, or can even conceive. So credit to anybody who's trying to do this, doing it actively. It's harder than it looks. I can only imagine. I can't speak from any expertise, but I'd imagine, Crimzo, this shit was, I think, in that same context, like going back to the start of your career, like was it similar? Was it different? Like what was like the time investment different from like just grinding it out on like Envision, and what ended up kind of like finishing out with Vancouver? Like what were some of those like big, like, dang, I didn't think of it this way, or like I didn't expect it to be like this hectic or chaotic, or what were some of those like unforeseen things?
Well, let me tell you, getting put on that Dallas team was like me just getting thrown into the fire, like actually just straight into the scorching hot fire. Everything was just completely out of whack the entire year. It was so difficult to kind of get my bearings and like just focus on like the game and not have to worry about things outside of the game. I think early on in my career, I was a bit more like stubborn and would like feel like, so I'm very like opinionated in terms of like strategy. I love like strategy and like Overwatch theory and all that. So earlier on, I had a bit of an issue where I would kind of like have an opinion, and it would be hard to kind of like change my mind. I think as time has gone on, like that's gotten a lot. I've become a lot more like open to like things. Maybe I'm not right. That's fine. But I think early on I was pretty stubborn. I think Dallas was definitely like just a crazy year, and I think Houston was probably like the best year in terms of like competing. Just like overall, like how hard the team was trying, kind of like how I was feeling, like the general direction of how the team was going. Like it felt really, really competitive, and we tried very hard. So I I do regret some things from there where I felt like I could have been a little bit more forgiving, a little bit more kind of like open. Um, so, but yeah, I mean, I think like what was said earlier, it's like every other year it seems like it's like I'm on a bad team, then a good team, then a bad team, then a good team. So it's like I'm kind of constantly kind of going back and forth. And that, you know, it's hard when things are so kind of like out of whack to kind of like stay focused on the game. Um, but for me, like I was never really worried about being on the absolute best team. Whenever I was thinking about teams, I always like considered playtime and salary was
Mm.
like the best two things. I could have gone to like a really good team and just sat on the bench, but I don't want to do that. That's boring.
Sure.
I want to be able to play, and I want to be able to like help the team like improve as a whole. Like, and then if things don't work out, then my idea was like, okay, if things don't work out, if I come here, I play my game, I do my job, and maybe my teammates are failing, then like the next year we can have some sort of turnover and we can try to improve that way.
Right.
But unfortunately, for whatever reason, like that wasn't really able to kind of happen. There was just every year was kind of like a flip flop where like I joined Dallas, and then that offseason they go all Korean. Because at that time Paris Eternal just like decided to sell all the Element Mystic players for no reason. And so like Dallas went all Korean, and then Houston, I joined Houston, and then the next year Houston basically went all Korean, but like they had Dante. And then I think it's a bit kind of like unfortunate, but I always valued playtime and kind of like salary, and yeah, maybe the teams weren't going to be the best, but I was willing to kind of like work through it and like find ways to get better. But obviously, it's a team effort, and everything kind of has to work in the same way for that to kind of happen. And unfortunately, sometimes that just didn't really happen.
Hey, I respect the, a non-paycheck stealer, somebody who's out here trying to, blue collar, it's an honest job, just wants to get out there and do what he likes to do.
Yeah, I think like sitting
that.
on a bench and like claiming like victory over your team when you just did nothing and just like we're just on the bench, didn't play at all, it's kind of weird to me. Like
lame,
you did nothing. Like, you know what I mean? Like if I'm gonna do something, that I want to be the one playing and doing it, or like having some sort of like hand in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so like I never cared about like the success in that way, in terms of like, oh, I'll just sit on the bench, you guys go play the game, I'll be here, I'll have some water for you. Like I didn't care about any of that. I just wanted to play the game, do my best, and that's about it.
Feel that. Coach Moon need not apply. Do not try to court Crimzo into another Shanghai Dreamer run, and no ring stealers. He wants that honest ring. I respect that. All right, shall we get into the top 10 flex supports? Should we get into the list?
I'm down.
Feeling listy. All right. So, as we've done in the last couple episodes, we're bringing, pro players now, I guess Crimzo, formerly pro player, on to talk about, some of the best players to, play in that Overwatch League era. And can't really have a better, judge of skill than somebody who's played in almost every year, if not every year. I think it was every year, right? Season 1?
Nah, I joined in season 3.
Okay. Well, most
the thing is, like, we're
still
around when like a lot of the, especially the NA talent in basically at the peak of academy, I would say, right? Like you were around then and competing against those guys that then were promoted, and also like a lot of bangers in there, right? Like you could. I sometimes argue if like the year you came up is the best, strongest rookie year, or if it's season 5, just because season 5 had also a couple of bangers, not least the rookie of the year and MVP in Personal Union. But yeah, like really strong rookie year. Therefore, also not just in Korea but also in North America, a lot of strong talent. Also because people still imported with their academy teams, right?
Yeah, I think during that time too, it was very hard to get in the door as a Western flex support, right? Like I was competing in contenders since season 1 of OWL. And even like when I joined Dallas that year, like had I not joined Dallas, I definitely wouldn't have been on a team at the very start of the year. I don't know, maybe I would have got picked up mid-year, but it was very difficult, I think, to kind of like get in. But eventually I did, and I was able to make a long career out of it. So
yeah, all these teams joking that they can try to pony up for all the best Korean talent.
I literally got told one time that we are looking at our Korean options.
That doesn't shock me. It's the one thing that I feel like most teams could take to like their board and be like, okay, so if we go Korean, our chance of success goes up 20%. Yep. It's like, well, here's some extra money. Go.
Yeah, like I straight up just got disregarded because like, actually, we're looking for a Korean in this role. I was like, oh, okay, sorry.
Great. I'll work on that.
Tell me it's Florida under Gunba without telling me it's Florida under Gunba.
No, it was not. It was not Florida. It was I'm pretty sure it was a season 3 team.
Okay. Yeah. You just aged out of Gunba's system, you know. You just, you know, that this
also
clip of
yes, also
him not uncoachable is just like actually just like cross hatching all names above like 21. It's just like that's. I mean, I respect that. That's, you know, a man knows what he wants.
You're right.
Hey, look, does have a ring. I don't have a ring, so
maybe he knows something we don't. I don't know.
He's got that vision. All right. As honor, I will lead us off with number 10. This one probably will not surprise Jessica, but I am interested to hear your take on this, Crimzo. My number 10 for the bestest flex support in history, coming in at 10. I put Monk, somebody who I think a little underrated, had a good end of the year World Cup. Not going to necessarily judge that, but as former Chinese Overwatch enjoyer, I think had a very successful career. I think beats out some names that I think fans will want to kind of throw out there. But I think Monk had a sizable hero pool that we kind of could see, led Chengdu to some of those successful runs. I think, you know, in 2021, I think it was, doing a ton of work with that team across the years. Somebody who I think had a pretty successful career. What do you any opinions on Monk, Crimzo?
No, I think Monk's pretty solid. He's been around for a while. I think he's shown to kind of like be pretty flexible, pretty good player. I don't have anything bad to say about him at all.
Oh yeah. So, all right. Jessica, who's at number 10?
No, like let me also talk about Monk.
Okay.
I think like he's really solid. He's arguably, am I talking shit? Maybe the second best APAC flex support
this year, or just in history?
General, that I can. I mean, it's a definitional issue, but I'm looking at my list, and depending on what you see as a APAC flex support, Monk is high up there for me.
Yeah, solid. I think like not too many other names outside of like Korea, you know.
Yeah.
It's like there are a couple of other like Chinese names, but I feel like Monk just is like that leader there, and yeah, I don't know, always stuck out, and it was an edge case. I was like, I could, you know, name some people, but I'm like, you know, give it to the boy. I don't think anybody else is gonna give some love to Monk. So that being said, number 10, I'll put Monk. Crimzo, number 10 for you.
All right, so the bottom of the list is kind of like a scramble.
Feel that.
I think there's a couple people that could be here,
but
I'm gonna go back in time, and I'm gonna put Kariv at number 10. And the reason why I'm putting Kariv at number 10, is Kariv was, you know, around for a very long time.
True.
At his peak, he was insane on a player. I think he always also seemed like, you know, like a great teammate, a great person to kind of like be around. Obviously, like he's still working with teams right now as a coach. So like, I think he's someone that has been around for a long time. I think he is just like a very strong player. And yeah, I think I can be happy with putting him at number 10. I actually think like some other players could be here too, but that's kind of who I'm settling with.
It's a name that you kind of have to throw around. I think prior to the show, Yiska and I were like, oh God, like what do we do with like these last couple spots? And it's like, all right, let's like make a short list. Kariv has to be on that short list. Homie's played forever. He's been around. Does have some like insane plays. Like I'll forever meme on that role star that he won. That like probably could have went somewhere else. That's okay. You know, it went how it went. The plays that he did make that, you know, I think captured the hearts and minds of maybe the voters and some of the fans, like kind of some sick plays.
Everybody's gonna remember that Titan sleep dart.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's just
100%.
that's just one of the historic plays, you know, of the Overwatch League. So
it is a bit of a monster, like a little bit feast or famine for me, where he's like either Criv's gonna win you this game or he's gonna make it extremely hard to win.
yeah,
Like, but when he makes those plays, it's like, dang, all right, Kriv might be heat this season. Like this might be, you know, that the turnaround. Successful player, I would say. Super fun to watch. End of the day, very entertaining.
Yep.
Yiska, number 10.
Yeah, I share, like, the bottom was the hardest part of this list. And at the end, I just looked at stats and just looked at
How German of you.
like I also stole some of the, you know, comparative metrics that Baroy came up with. Just to name a couple of, should I name honorable mentions, because it kind of gives away who I have and the rest, but like there were a couple of considerations, and actually I call it call it pandering to the guest, but I value longevity a lot, and given that it's, you know, 4 years, which you have not played for the entirety, where like in some situations due to Korean induction,
yeah.
you were not playing, but I think I think it's fine and fair, especially given your performance. I was very interested seeing that you valued your Zen so lowly, because there's two reasons why I thought you'd be more confident. The first one is I feel like a lot of people had you as Zen in their construction, at least early on. That's the puzzle piece I saw you being shoved around with, right? And I think there was a lot of demand for you, for instance, between like after season 3. Like I think that you talked about it in your AMA, right? Like Houston, Gladiators, and I'm missing the one. Which one was the third team?
I did trial for Atlanta one time, but there was also Titans, but they still had second win, so I'm not part of that.
Right. Yeah. So, long story short,
Boston. Sorry.
Yeah, and the stats also banged on Zen comparatively. So yeah, I have Crimzo in 10.
That's awesome.
Based.
I honestly the reason that I have you in 10 is almost certainly because I'm like, I cannot imagine who you guys have ahead, even based on your lower ranking picks. Like for Joe, I already have no idea. I thought Wonk would be way higher up in your list.
I don't think you could juice him that high. There's so many like huge names that you have to compare him to, and like winners.
Crimzo, you don't know this, and you might have not been. It might have not been possible for you to come on if you saw Joe's main support list. But this man had IDK in 4. Okay,
let's go.
That's all I need to know.
Let's go.
So I'm smelling some bullshit coming from Joe.
Based on the first pick. This is a based list. This is the truth right here. All right, and to follow up that true statement. Okay, honest blue collar statement right there. Number 9 for me, Lastro. Solid. I think surprised the shit out of me coming in. What was that 2021, 2022? That Houston roster, whatever Houston roster he played on, where he had to actually move to main support. I think that was like, dang, all right, Lastro can actually kind of play a little bit of main support. All right, based. Super solid on Valiant years ago. Talk about a longevity. Lastro's been around forever. Yeah, Gladiators this year kind of, ejected, but yeah, I'd rate Lastro kind of high. I think, solid all across. Solid picks. I think, I don't know. I can't think of exactly what I'd like tie, because you talk about like how like, I would agree that like Crimzo, I kind of envisioned Crimzo as like, that Zen player, but also as on Dallas, I think was fantastic. I think Lastro was kind of just good overall, and You do it enough that enough years, enough teams. So yeah, I'd put Lastro number 9. What say you, Crimzo? Lastro, good flex support.
I think he's pretty solid. I think I had him competing for the 10th spot, like around like 11th or 12th, probably. I don't think he's anything too crazy.
Sure.
I think I would definitely would put Monk above Lastro.
Okay.
I think, but I mean, anyways, I think Lastro is pretty solid.
I feel that.
So it's all right.
Here's my hot take: Lastro peaked before Overwatch League. Because I vividly remember, were you coached by Dream, or was that? Did you miss each other just by season?
Season 3.
No.
No, you weren't. Right. Like former Houston Outlaws coach Dream, we had like a discussion where, like, there was a season where a couple of guys, it wasn't just Dream, but others also claimed that Lastro had a better contender season than Alarm. And I remember being very mad at that.
That seems a bit crazy to me.
Yeah,
but
that's a little.
In fairness, he popped the fuck off and hard carried during that time. And then, in the league, of course, like more like a player that only got the chance to play on a big team pretty late, and then promptly, sort of like it's a little recency biasy that I value, like the shitting the bed pretty highly in this season. But yeah, it's a guy that I have in an honorable mention. Certainly one of the guys that I had also in contention for 10.
Yeah, I think you can't like anything higher than. I feel like even 9 is like what really kind of sold me was like the main support stuff. I think like remembering that happened and like being kind of surprised at that. I was like, oh okay, like it's a little bit deeper than I think. It's almost a different attribute than I think some of the players in the list. So I was like, okay, like I'll take that in consideration. I think it's pretty solid, like as a player overall, primarily a flex support though. But yeah, that's kind of my argument for Lastro. Yiska, you're number 9. Change it up,
dude. Okay, to explain to Crimzo, I'm actually the president of the Karif hate train. Okay, like hate that club. Like this kid has been overrated basically every season he was in the league, and somehow you still got to put him in 9. I feel like yes, like as Joe said, like the one season where he got roll start, he got it off 2 sleep darts, dude. Like that's it. Like during the most like people get a ballot, they who do I 2 sleep darts, holy shit, and it just wrote the name in. Okay, there was no more neurons firing than this during that award season, but guy had some longevity. Guy had some interest. I remember there was some ominous interest from Krusty. I would have liked to see that cooking during the time. I think it's for the better in the end, especially if we get later into the list that this deal never happened. But there's also a little bit unfortunateness in Karif's teams where he landed. The fun thing about Karif was that he somehow felt like a slightly smarter player than what you would have thought of him based on the stories you heard behind the scenes of what kind of a person he is, you know? Like not more like in the Faith way, you know, in the
kind of silly, kind of goofy,
funny, stupid guy, like, with that spin and the whole agility stuff and whatnot. But yeah, like by the mere fact that Karif was also around and tolerated. Was he not an assistant coach even for Gunba? I think that guy.
Yeah, he was on the roster and then he moved to coaching.
Right. Like, I don't think mediocrity would be tolerated. So I just by that filter check of Gunba, I have to assume he's also very smart about the game because I wouldn't know, right? But yeah. I think Karif, having him somewhere down here is probably justified, and putting him outside the top 10 feels a little bit like hating. But maybe Joe is about to take my presidency away from me.
Captain Hater, reporting for duty.
I will also say, like, for what you said about him being very overrated, I think in general, my honest opinion is that support in general is just so overrated. I think people think that flex supports are like very like highly rated, but for me, like it's flex support's the most overrated role.
Yes.
Because so like my opinion is like if you want to build a successful team, for me, I'm looking at supports last. And I mean like you can't have someone that's like so far below like the level of like
you
your
have to
other
meet
the rest of
the
your
check.
teammates. Yeah. Like but I think like you can easily have like a solid support player and like win. But and like you have like really good tank and DPS, but if you have like a really really good support and like mediocre DPS or tank, I don't think you can win.
Yeah.
Like I think like that's just how kind of like Overwatch is. And I mean, we're talking about like a support role, right? You're sitting in the back. Your main kind of job is to like pretty much like just stay alive and like keep your teammates alive, and you're not really the one that's like taking a whole bunch of like risk and like, you know, setting up tempo and all that stuff, and so I think like for me like support in general is typically overrated because of like I think like tank and DPS are just much more important. Obviously, I'm not saying you can have like a really bad support and win, but like just someone that pretty much like does like the job and like stays alive and like keeps the team alive. I think that's all you really need, in my opinion.
I feel that. I think that's always like a fun experiment to do. Is like, okay, if you had a set budget of X amount of Monopoly money dollars, like where do you spend it when it comes to like an esports position? You know, like when you look at like League of Legends, like do you spend it all mid lane? Do you spend it, you know, how do you spend it in terms of Overwatch? And I feel like everybody's got like slightly different opinions where it's like, yeah, I think a lot of people do see the flashy plays when it comes to flex support, but is that as valuable as somebody, especially in Overwatch 2, that can play the entire tank pool? Is it as valuable as somebody like, you know, Hyperflex DPS that can play literally everything on the roster? Like, is that, you know, how, when it comes to like brass tacks and you have like a budget to spend, like how are you actually going to spend it? I would challenge people to think about it that way, because it's probably not going to be a lot on supports.
Yeah, I was thinking like if you were to do like a fantasy draft of like all the players and like the history of the league, like you're crazy if you pick like a support player with like your first 2 picks, in my opinion.
Agreed. Yeah.
Like I think you absolutely need to be like focusing on your tanks and your DPS. Right. And then supports, like I said, like you can't have somebody that's like completely awful at the game.
And have a griefer, but come on.
Yeah, but I mean like tanks and DPS are just like they set the pace for the team, in my opinion, always.
Yeah.
Agreed. All right. Number 9 for you, Crimzo. Who's not last?
So my number 9 is Monk.
Okay.
Because similar to kind of like what you were saying, you know, really solid player, like tons of longevity. I think he's been doing really well in terms of like, you know, enabling like the spark kind of like DPS and tank. I think he is a player that does the job. Like he's not really gonna do anything too crazy, too flashy. But he's gonna like be solid. He's gonna do the job. I think he's a very solid player, and that's why I have him at number 9.
I feel that. Yeah. Somebody. Yeah. I think a lot of my points agreed with. Yiska, did you? Let's make Yiska squirm a little bit. Do you have Monk on your list, Yiska?
Yes, it's a number 8.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Number 8 is Monk.
We got a little like step up effect.
Yeah. No, I had to hate on Karif a little. But I also legitimately think like he was during all the Chengdu eras, like when he was with the team, like he was never a liability. It felt like. I think there was a time when he was like A or B, right? Like with Huawei. But generally speaking, I feel like it also speaks to his qualities that he became like the staple of the Chinese super team, quote unquote, right? So yeah, just longevity, probably the best flex support to ever play in China, especially after Shy switched, right? Like I guess that would have been, you know, remember Joe, and by the way, later on as we get to that person, we will have to talk about it, but I think what Crimzo says about flex support being like, or its support not being important, I would agree, with the exception of Overwatch League Season 1, where I still remember that Baroy also like sort of statistically proved that the output of numbers was heavily correlated with the team's
the
ranking, right? Like maybe there's
golden
also
ratio, right?
some counter correlation, but it felt like their flex supports, especially Zen, still had impact. Also because sidelines weren't as well understood, and I mean, Discord was busted and that type of stuff, right? But yeah, I think that the fact how long Monk was able to stick around, I think that's like a quality that sticks through a lot of it. I think I might have some guys lower than others would have them just based on a lack of longevity, and we'll get to those soon.
I think that's exactly where you're going to fight me on 8 for me, because this is my first ring getter. This is a new champion, the last champion when it comes to flex supports. I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say RuPaul is my number 8. I think he's had a fantastic. I think this year in particular really put me on the map, or really put him on the map for me. I know everybody, wants to poo-poo like Pro-Am. That being said, and I don't think it was like the most seriously taken stuff. Want to remember like Shock still in Korea, they're playing in like blackout curtains and like a hotel PC bong, God knows where, off the grid somewhere in the countryside of South Korea. But I think RuPaul really kind of stuck out. I think throughout the year, his Ana was fantastic. I think it started fantastic. It ended extremely solid. I think him on Alari was really, really strong when they did play it. It just surprised the shit out of me. It is very recency bias. It's neighboring names that do sound a little heretical, but I genuinely believe that I think he will be, we'll see what happens in 2024, but I think this is like the kind of start of his like top 10 presidency, if you will, his candidacy in these next to these big names. So yeah, I'm gonna put RuPaul number 8.
Ranking based on future potential, based. I guess.
Okay, a little bit.
Why you had no problem filling up this list? I personally think like 1.5 seasons is not enough. It's not very many. That goes without saying. I'll hold that, grief that he doesn't have a ton of playtime. Especially because it's like these short seasons, right? It's not like season 1, 40 games type of stuff.
That's true. But that's where it's just like, okay, I can't in good faith put somebody, wherever Badoshan is, hope he's doing well. I can't do that. Like, homie did get a ring. Like, they're equal there, but
he was
season
also 1... probably second best flex support during that time, no?
Fair.
I don't have him in my top 10 either, but like, I feel like he has a stronger claim than RuPaul just based on longevity, because he was in for 3 seasons, even though we'll forget about the Dynasty one.
For 3 seasons? I completely forgot about that guy after season 1.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of, yeah.
I mean, London and Goats was also just jokes, right? Like,
yeah, longest fight, I think, in league history, just floundering around. Was it them in Washington just to kind of slap fighting each other?
Yeah.
That's Overwatch I would love to not remember. But yeah. Any opinions on RuPaul, Crimzo? Is that a hot take?
Well, my opinion is I see exactly what you're seeing because I also have him as my number 8.
Let's go!
Oh, Jesus Christ.
And the reason why... So, like, yeah, he is kind of the new kid.
Yeah.
Like, has a ton of success. I think he does have, like, a lot of potential. I think, he has only played, like, a year and a half. But, like, his rate of improvement has been pretty incredible.
Yeah.
I think, obviously, he had an amazing team around him. But I think he also was able to survive Gumba coaching. I think that's like a test in itself that he was able to kind of like survive. I think whenever I've seen him, I think he's always been kind of like a really solid player. I don't think he's gonna make many mistakes. I don't think he's gonna make like super huge plays, but I think he's gonna be very, very solid. I think he can cover pretty much every support character. He seems like he's like a nice guy. He's not gonna like cause any like issues in a team. I mean, I don't know that for sure. I'm just kind of like, it's what I've kind of seen and what I've
It's
heard.
a soul read, yeah.
I think he does have like tons of kind of potential for the future. It's a shame that like we're not going to be able to see like another year of the league and see him kind of like progress even more and see what happens, like what happens to him next, basically. But I think like he's got tons of potential. I think he is very solid. He can play every hero. Yeah, I have him pretty confidently at number 8.
Hell yeah. Let's go. That's so funny. I feel like every time we do this, there's always like a couple names that everybody's just like aligned on. So it's funny that was like my one that I was like, all right, I'm gonna get some looks from some people if I put Rupali. That's funny. So I'll lead us. I'll continue us at number 7. This is another one that I feel like is going to be scrutinized.
Is going to be much wiggle room.
Bombastic, side-eyed for all the Zoomers. Yeah, I'm getting the algorithm out there. Hope.
The next pick will determine if you forgot someone. If
no,
this is a bullshit pick, you forgot someone.
It's no. It's not. It's not bullshit. But I think it is like weirdly low when you see the number, you see the name. You're like, really? Right. But like you got to look at like the success of the names above him.
Right.
I have JJoNak at 7.
Okay.
Again. Backloaded career, season 1, an absolute phenom, blew open stats. I remember like on some of those older podcasts, some of these old heads talking about like how some teams like wanted like their flex supports were like, oh, I want to be in positions like JJoNak, like give me the resources. I want to be a playmaker, like kind of molded a role in a way in the season. Had a solid career after that, not to the same degree that he was in season 1, but I remember his like BAP was solid. His Zen obviously is fantastic. I think people sleep on his Ana. Solid Ana player as well. But yeah, I think like success is what kind of limits him. Like the fact that like he has some like, what we would deem as like, minor tournaments or like stage titles under his belt is solid. But then everybody else, I think, past him on this list are like either could have had a ring, should have had a ring, was in team jail, what have you. JJoNak never really got that, never really got to finish out his career, or chose not to. I can't even remember exactly how that worked out. But yeah, I have JJoNak at 7. Yiska, what you think?
Same.
Aha, there it is.
Yeah, I was concerned in the way you sold it because like I feel like the rest of the list
feels weird though, right? Like to put JJoNak that low, it's just like fuck. But
no,
you kind of can't.
Okay, number 1, a supreme hater moment. I don't think he was MVP in season 1. I still remain it should have been Prophet, even though nobody believes this, and everyone will say, "Oh yeah, that like he's about to say Kape should have gotten it." Nope, Prophet should have definitely gotten it. The votes were atrociously bad, and especially the way who they gave it to was just like beyond the pale awful. Okay, Agility's 3 votes, Prophet 0. Okay, but I think. Yeah, there is some longevity there. There could have been more longevity. I feel like that it was pretty well established that it wasn't his in-game skill that... not that I should consider this for the sake of the award, but like it signals that Season 3 wasn't like just a career death and like a falling off the cliff. This guy could have played Season 4. Just like other things got in the way. And you also have to sort of credit that he's the only support MVP that we ever had, which is a phony one. But I will say that gets you into this relatively set club. I'm wondering if Crimzo currently is thinking like, nah, I don't have that guy on my list, and I'm wondering who else you would get in there, because like for me here. Yeah, it got like easy. It's just like shuffling around a little bit in there, like. But like after 7, I was good, and then I had to, sort of ass pull.
So, I do, or I don't have much to say. I think he is on my list.
Okay.
He is in my top 10, but he's not at number 7.
Okay, fair.
At number 7, I have Alarm.
Okay.
And the reason why. I think obviously, he could be Alarm could easily be top 3.
Yes.
Yeah.
In like if we had gotten to see him more, and had he played the game, in the future seasons, I think that he was an amazing player. I think he was an amazing teammate. I think he could cover everything. He was my boogeyman in Contenders.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, I think he could easily be way higher. It's just obviously tragic situation. So yeah, I think I have Alarm at 7.
Fair play. I respect that.
I'll just piggyback on it because we're here. JJoNak Alarm for me fairly close, but I also got Alarm at 6.
Okay. Huh.
So Alarm, I think legitimately, and I'm not capping and I'm not adding any, sentimentality to the situation because of what happened. I think this guy would have been GOAT had he played for the entire time. There was, I feel like there was a myth, like a crazy energy around him starting from Contenders. He was a crazy good teammate. I think mechanically you would have always kept up. I do not think there is a flex support that was top 3 on every single role to the degree that Alarm was consistently. Had an amazing break, one of the first ones that were really good at the character. I think like overall that kid was just like something else, but unfortunately he just didn't play enough, right? Like in order to be considered any higher here. I also, hot take, think he should have probably won MVP that year as well. During you remember he won Rookie of the Year, which to some might be. I think he considered it a stronger award than the MVP, just because you only have one chance to get it, right? And he was really happy to get it. But I think your former coach Harsha also shares the opinion that season 3 wasn't even the best Flatter season, right? So, I think like, yeah, that kid just was something special all around.
Yeah, Alarm is definitely on my list, but apparently cranked, juiced, in my estimation. So Yiska has given his 6, so I'll give mine another ring grabber, another crown haver. As much as I feel like I flip flop on this guy a lot, and that's Izayaki. I don't think you can really look at Shanghai and not go like, yeah, definitely like contributed a lot, super successful, not a big playmaker. I feel like he's like the benchmark of like, he just kind of, I don't want to call him a role player because that feels like diminutive, but like just like gonna do the job. Super, super solid. He's gonna have his moments where he looks like a god, but like overall, there's nothing like bad to say about Izayaki, but there's also like not a ton of like extremely captivating moments I feel like I can remember about Izayaki. So that's where I kind of like, he's kind of sits at that like average marker for me at 6. What do you think about Izayaki, Crimza?
I think when I think about Izayaki, I think he's just a worse version of Shu. Like, to me, I think he is a very aggressive player.
Okay.
Similar to Shu. I think they both have pretty similar issues as well, as like, that aggression kind of gets them into trouble sometimes. I think both can kind of play. I mean, I think Shu is just better at all the heroes, but I think that Izayaki is a very solid player. I think he's definitely, obviously he's got a ring. He's a very, very good player. I think, but I do think he's just worse than Shu, like just a worse version.
Yeah. Feel that. So who comes at 6 for you? What's the halfway marker?
My 6 is JJoNak.
Okay.
Yeah, my 6 is JJoNak. I was really flip flopping JJoNak and Alarm 6 and 7. I really was not sure, but for JJoNak, it's just like obviously season 1, random guy comes out of nowhere, just absolutely destroys everybody on Zen. I think obviously like it's not just on him, like as far as like how he performed. I think having a really strong team around you helps a lot. I think he did have like a lot of resources to kind of like help him to kind of like excel, no pun intended, to like be an insane player. I think it's a shame that we didn't get to see more of him. I could not, or I didn't keep track of him too much after the season 1 and season 2. Or even like season 2 is kind of like iffy for me to like remember kind of like how he played. But from my memory, like he was always like a very, very good player. I think he could play all the heroes. I don't remember his BAP. I don't remember ever seeing him on BAP. But like his Ana and his Zen, obviously really, really solid, I think. I think obviously he captivated the entire league of how he played Zen. Everybody wanted to be JJoNak for a long time. And I think he's just like a great player. He kind of like pioneered a new way to see Zen. So yeah, I think he's my number 6.
All right. The only support MVP meeting us at the halfway marker. For audio listeners, we're going to quickly do a quick little recap of everybody's lists up until this point. So my 10 to 6 is Monk, Lastro, RuPaul, JJoNak, Izayaki. Crimzo's comes in at Kariv, Monk, RuPaul, Alarm, JJoNak. Yiska's is Crimzo, Kariv, Monk, JJoNak, and Alarm. As we move into the top 5, which it sounds like everybody's got like relatively the same names. It's just orders that are shuffled. Yeah. So I'll just go out there. This is a pretty, I don't know, feels like a easy one. Number 5, I've got Twilight. I think one of my favorite players. Incredibly flexible. Homie just makes plays. Gotta love him for it. A fan of just hiding in a corner on Volsky Industries and just trying to nade people and doing some weird sleep dart shit. Like always somebody to try to make a play, even sometimes it'll bite him in the ass. And I feel like that's most of this upper echelon. And yeah, you want to talk about longevity. Not too many people are still around as long as Twilight. So yeah, I'm going to put Twilight at 5. Crimzo, any fun Twilight memories?
Oh, I just remember I was scrimming. I was in Envy and we scrimmed Titans during some sort of, I don't remember what meta it was, but I remember him playing Ana and I looked at his POV and this guy just did not miss a shot. Like it was like I was watching like an actual like cheater. Like this guy was just insane. I think obviously very long career. Obviously he's in my top 5. I think the way he played Ana was like something for many people to kind of like look up to.
Okay.
I think he's just a very, very strong player. I think there's not too much like bad things to say. I kind of wish that we got to see like more of him.
Yeah.
And not like have him kind of like sharing playtime, which is fine. I just wish we could have seen more. But yeah, he's just a very strong player.
Feel that. Yiska, you're number 5. Or any thoughts on Twilight before we completely pass him up?
We'll get to Twilight for me.
Okay, that's fair.
But yeah, it does feel a little like hating because my 5 is Izayaki.
Okay.
Because this guy has been around since season 1, right? Like late season 1, he comes in, plays, of course, goes through the gulag in various ways in the following season, but it just never, like, even when people were saying he's the best in the world, it never felt that way to me.
Yeah.
I think like the longevity of this career he's among the longest playing. Yeah, I think he's with Violet, of course, that's outstanding. He's the only one that's been here since season 1. I guess you could consider like that he still played a decent or more, I think, this season than did he play more than Twilight? It was kind of interesting that those guys ended up on the same team. But yeah, like he has a ring, he has the longevity, he definitely like consistently top 5 in during the seasons. It just never felt like this guy takes a game over like Shu would, right? So yeah, I like I actually really like the framing of like just a worse Shu. And I also think like especially in the later half of his career, I feel like he only ever really popped up when he had a good team, right? Like it is really like a player that doesn't do as outstandingly without a good team. So yeah, I was debating like between my 4 and Izayaki, but yeah, Izayaki top 5, I think. is fair.
Yeah, don't hate that. Ring getter. Crimzo, you're number 5.
I mean, my number 5 is also Izayaki. I
There you
think
go.
that's a good spot for him. I do think he's a budget shoe. I think he's been around for a very long time. He's got a ring. I mean, yeah, it's pretty much not too much. I haven't, to be honest, like I haven't like watched him too much just because like he was always in APAC, and
Yeah,
obviously it's kind of hard to keep track of APAC players when I'm also like playing the game
100%.
and all that stuff. So I haven't been able to keep track of him too closely, but I think he's pretty obviously. I think he's deserving of a top 5 spot. I think he. I think he's like you said he was kind of flip flopping between your 4 and 5, but I think he's a very solid 5 to me. Like 5-4 is not to be flip flopped with him. Like I think he's just 5. Like that's all I got for him.
That's where you got.
Yeah, but I mean he's a good player. He's been around for a long time. He's got a chip. Yeah, just good guy.
There you go.
How was he this season?
Fair.
This season, okay. To be honest, and this might spoil my number 4 a little bit, but I do not think that he should be playing over Twilight when it comes to Ana.
Yeah.
Like this guy needs to. I don't know why. Every time I see him on Ana, and I think that they have Twilight, I'm like, why is this guy in the game? Because he can hit the shot, like he can hit the cooldowns, right? He can hit the sleep darts, he can hit the nades. But I just think like he doesn't have like the game sense, in my opinion, that Twilight does, and like the experience that like Twilight can bring. I feel like so like yeah. So Twilight is my number 4. I really didn't understand. Like, I couldn't. I think it's probably got to be something more like internal, like behind the scenes stuff.
Sure.
But,
Right.
For me,
BJ Gons and G, yeah.
Yeah. So for me, yeah, I think Twilight should definitely have been playing Diana there.
Agreed. I also have Twilight at 4. I feel like Twilight is. You know the crazy stuff about Twilight is? I heard he doesn't even play the game that much. Like
yeah, it's similar. It's similar to Shu actually. Shu doesn't really play too much ranked, or at least not anymore. But like I think even in the past, it seemed like he's probably someone that's like not really like grinding super hard. He's just on a different level. He just understands the game on like a deeper level.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think like in hindsight, it probably should have been obvious always that he was just like the most talented player with Haksal on that runaway roster. Going back to pre-Owl and contenders, but yeah, I mean Twilight is an absolute beast. Also, of course, Ring Bearer got close in season 2 as well. I wonder if you can just say he's the best Ana that has ever played the game.
I would say he is.
Yeah.
I would say that he's like the most. He's like the complete package in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think.
I'd agree with that.
I think. I mean, the other guys you would consider would be like Fielder and Shu.
Right.
And I think both of those guys kind of have something that I feel like is lacking, or like it's like a sort of like weakness. Not anything crazy, but like a weakness. And I think Twilight, he does have some weaknesses, but I feel like he's much more of a complete kind of like Ana player where he can kind of like flip the switch and like do both of like being really aggressive and also like being safe and staying in the back. So I feel like I would put him as like the best Ana player just because he can do that. He can kind of like flip the switch. He can do everything. So yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah.
I like the way that you put that. That's like, you have Fielder, who I think perennially will like kind of be ascribed as like the heel bot of Atlanta and Dallas. And then you have Shu, who's like hiding in the back of like a Glad scrim, just like waiting for Chengdu to pass him up. Like it's like Escape from Tarkov, and he's jumping out of a bush like Akimbo style, fucking gunning down people. Like, just hyper aggro all the time, just trying to make a play. Like those two do operate on the different poles. And Twilight, I think you said it well. Like can flip the switch, be aggressive when needs to be, has the game sense to kind of know when he needs to play that role. So yeah, I like that. That's a good one. That's a good one. Number 4 for me, I have Alarm. I'm gonna be sentimental. I'm gonna do some projecting into the future. The what could have been. I think Alarm probably is on a championship team. If things go a little differently, I think just an all out complete package to the exponential degree. Can play the flex, can play the main into that some of that Brig stuff. I feel like him on Illari would have been a fucking treat to see. Developing as a player into Overwatch 2. I think you want to talk about somebody who unironically would take over games. I would juice Alarm. That's one of those players that I wouldn't hate if somebody was like, yeah, if he's available, maybe I can like get a friend of his and like, maybe I pay him a little extra. Like, hey, I feel like any of these top 5 players, if you're trying to like push that flex support agenda, that's the only way to do it. You get somebody like Alarm, you get somebody like Twilight, some of these other names we're talking about, we will talk about. That's the only way that you're going to be able to kind of push that forward. Outside of that, it's kind of mostly samey. So yeah, I'm going to have Alarm at 4. I think everything else withstanding. I'll out of the same points to echo there. Yiska, do you want to ring us in with number 3?
I'm really interested. If you guys, okay, here is the thing. He never had a ring, okay, and the lack of performance on Kiriko also stung, which reflects badly on his work ethic, I think. So okay. I have to like, even though he's one of 3. He's one of the best players of all time in his role. And he has the longevity, and he has done it on multiple teams. I gotta put Shu in 3rd. I think like he had potential to do more. I think he should have, like, if he played his politics right, he could have been on better teams over his careers. If he had practiced a little bit more, I think his, especially like his Kiriko, while it was relevant, it could have netted better results. But rest assured, like, that guy won the Gladiators stage, first one. Like, that play is still one of the most impressive, best plays of all time of a single individual, just turning a match around. And mechanically a monster. Even as late as this season, I feel like I still remember that sleeped out on Capster. So yeah, there's not too much bad to say. It's just like I feel like I have to justify reasons as to keep him. Yeah.
I feel that. I think that feels pretty right to put Shu at 3rd, and that's exactly where I have him. We talked about, Crimzo brought up like the differing styles of those flex support. Shu is that like hyper aggro, like playmaker style that I love. But and yeah, it was like I was expecting.
Is Joe looking for you, Joe? Crimzo? Oh no! Wait. Hello?
Oh, hello.
All right. I switched server,
I guess.
Okay, the server switch. I can edit it. No big deal. But yeah, Shu at 3rd for me. I think a lot of those points, I would agree. And yeah, so you're number 3.
So, with the top 3, I think that it's straightforward who's in the top 3. It's more about like kind of who's where. I think for me, I also have Shu on number 3 because I think he is like the one player that I think can actually just like take over a game. But I also think like he has a pretty big issue, in my opinion, of being too aggressive and dying in very strange ways. Okay. Where, like, I specifically remember watching him on Root. I don't remember. I think it was against Florida, maybe last season or something like that, where this guy would literally just like keep walking up main and then just die, and it happened 4 fights in a row. Like instantly, he's just dead instantly. And I think like that's just what kind of like player he is, right? He's gonna walk up. He's gonna be really aggressive. It's gonna get him into trouble a lot of the time. And I think like he is someone that like is an amazing player. Like he'll hit the shots, he'll hit the cooldowns and all that. Like it cannot be understated. He's probably like the most mechanically gifted player, I would say. Like he's just an amazing player. But I do think like the weakness is there. I think that for my personal view of like support, like I was saying earlier, like
Yeah.
he's someone that you would want to have on like a mid-table team to like elevate your team, but at the highest level, I feel like you wouldn't want someone like him, and you would want someone that like is gonna like do the job better and like doesn't have to make like the big clutch plays because you already have other clutch players in like tank and DPS.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have him at number 3. I also think he's a really nice guy. I've heard good things about him. So yeah, that's where I got him.
Yeah, does feel like almost you can use Shu to compensate, where it's like, oh, we couldn't get like a strong DPS here, or our tank's a little weak. It's like Shu can maybe be that catalyst to, like you said, take over games, and maybe you can try to iron out some of those positional things, or the ego of trying to feel like you need to do so much. Here, I'll throw you guys an audible because I feel like our last two will probably be the same names, but possibly interchange. Do we just want to reveal the last two and kind of get those done and over with? Yiska, how do you feel?
Yeah, I guess we could.
Uh-oh.
It's a hard decision. It's really close to me.
Okay, all right.
I think okay, here's the consideration. I think the reason why you have either first or second is a categorization argument, where you have to think about, like, okay, Violet was a main support player for Houston, but he also played a shitload of Kiriko. So that's is that a flex support? Probably most would argue yes. So in his duty as a main support, he played flex support heroes, and those should count towards this list, right? That's how I perceive this. It is really challenging to aggregate it in that case. I think the first bonus that Violet has over Fielder is before Fielder gets into the league.
Wait, you guys have Fielder? Oh, you guys don't have... Okay, my bad. Just kidding. Yeah. Just jokes, guys. Just jokes. It's a callback to not having Chio on my main support list, okay?
It's Rolf.
It was a haha. It's Rolf. I was going to say Jaehong, but whatever. Anyways, continue. Sorry.
Yeah, like, before Fielder even gets into the league, Violet already has a ring, and he was one of the best players on that team that year, right? Even though I would say that's not his best year. Then, like, you go into season 3, it's hard for Fielder during that time, right? Because he's still on ping, and I think there's very little argument starting from season 4 onwards that Fielder was not just the better flex support, especially like because of the categorization 5 and 6, right? Fielder wins one in season 5, so the impressive thing for Fielder, for the argument for Fielder for me is, you thought this guy was a heal bot until he didn't have to pocket Fearless, and that was the dominant strategy. And then this guy also pumped massive damage this year. Was I think the highest DPS of all flex supports for a large part of the season. Which just means this guy just like plays what is necessary. Now, being a put into a heal bot position, just because he would have been capable of doing something else, still doesn't, like, we're not rating potential, we're rating actual play, right? I will also say, Violet is my GOAT. Violet is the greatest player that we've had in Overwatch League history. And it should therefore not be a slide to him when I say I think Fielder is the best flex support in Overwatch League history.
Okay. Yeah, I think the way that you kind of preface that, I was like, yeah, this sounds like a Fielder 1. Violet 2. Crimzo? Any takes? Any reveals?
I think, yeah, so, I mean, it's not going to be much of a surprise given what I'm kind of saying, but I do also have Fielder number 1, and I have Violet at number 2. And I think Fielder is just exactly what I'm talking about when I mean, like, someone who can do the job really well, be super solid, like, basically he's gonna do like the bare minimum, but I feel like if he had to, he would be able to like go another level. And I think we saw a little bit of that on the Paris days when he was kind of playing on ping and he was playing with like the other. He wasn't with like a full god squad around him, right? He was still like he was playing on ping and like he was like much more of a like carry on that team than he was like in the rest of the years where he could kind of like just do the job and keep his guys alive and all that stuff. So I feel like he is like in many ways like the best and like the most perfect flex support player when I in my vision of like what a flex support player needs to be like successful. I think he can pick up. I mean, his Zen is a bit of a question mark, obviously.
Sure.
But he can. I feel like the rest of the heroes he can like pick up really easily, really well. He's gonna pick it up. He's gonna do the job. He's gonna practice. I haven't heard anything about like how he is as like a teammate or anything like that. So I'm gonna assume that it's on the good side of things. But like I said, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then the thing for Violet is like, yeah, he won season 2 and season 3. He was an insane player. But then season 4, he did kind of like fall off
a little bit.
Pretty hard, I think. And then and then he just became like a main support player. So it's kind of weird. I feel like had he kind of committed to flex support, like there's a very real chance that he could be number 1.
Yeah.
It's also very weird to me that like this guy just doesn't play Ana. Like I don't know why.
Yeah, it's
so strange to me because like Ana is such like an important hero, and maybe like if we had gotten to see his Ana and like he was a good Ana, that he could even like take over Fielder. But it's just a weird thing for me, that like he just doesn't or has never really played Ana, and like he's always had like Twilight to be there to play Ana.
Fucking architect.
Yeah, but for me, like Fielder is just he's my number 1. I do agree that Violet is probably like the GOAT in like the Overwatch League as a whole, for like his success and like how far he's gotten as a player and being able to like switch roles and all that. But for flex support specifically, I'm taking Fielder.
The way that you kind of like remind me of that Ana stuff, it does make this difficult, but it's tough for me to argue 2 championships, the GOAT status. It does feel like we're not splitting hairs, but like it is kind of a we're looking at like the tiniest little things. One whole character really isn't that tiny, but in the grand scheme of things, yeah, I would put Violet as 1, Fielder 2. I feel like Fielder is that to me is like that staple like safe player. Obviously these last couple years has had the God Squad, as you put it, around him twice. You don't really need to do a ton. I do remember him on Paris, even, going back to, I think, Dallas days, still doing quite, is participating a little bit more in the kill feed than he has been in the last couple years. But that's where I just look at Violet and is like, that's the player who I feel like those are the attributes that I would want, somebody who is just going to be able to take over that game. I will forever kind of look at his positioning and wonder sometimes like, what was that BAP jump? Like, why did you do that? I don't know. Like, it's just kind of weird. There are a couple like, Moira plays that you'll see him do every once in a while. I'm just like, why fade forward? That's strange. But hey, I'm not the GOAT, so what? Who am I? But yeah, it is a tough one. I don't hate a Fielder 1. I think fans will be like, oh, how could you do that to Violet? But I think
yeah, you got
career.
The right take. Just say it.
I mean, it is the safe take, but I don't disagree that Fielder definitely could be 1. I think, the Ana thing definitely like makes me question mine and be like, yeah, no, you're right. Violet just never played Ana. It's really fucking weird. Yeah, it's kind of just int sometimes. But to me, it's like the accolades. It's like, it's really hard to argue.
Here's the question that I have. Which hero would you take Violet over Fielder?
Zen.
That's it, right?
That's about it, yeah.
Like, it's not Kiriko.
No, it's not Ana. For sure, it's not Ana.
It's not Ana. Brig, but both, they kind of
Brig is a question mark,
right?
yeah.
Like, which is, but just like based on the pairing, rather, I guess, like, I would say Violet's Brig probably isn't so hot, given how much they went to Kiriko.
Yeah.
And then Illari, we never really saw either of those play that to a representative amount of time.
Sure.
But yeah, like especially the Ana one, which is such a huge hero in
it is like the staple flex support almost, at least in these days. It's like, yeah, if you can't have an Ana, it's like
it's also like a little bit of what I value is like, okay, you're creating a god squad. You already have Lip and Stalker, right? And these guys, and Vigilante, I guess. And these guys tell you who they'd like to have on the team. And I'm pretty sure Violet was available, right? And I'm pretty sure those guys said, please give us Fielder, right?
Yeah.
I feel like, especially at that time, in preparation to Season 6, most people in the Overwatch League, the players just had clearly Fielder above. But yeah, like the argument for Violet is also really strong, just because like he has the longevity. I think he started late Season 1, right? Even though that all I remember from late season, from his early career is just like being chicken shit around Zen ults.
Sure.
And getting baited out of them frequently, but his improvement was super rapid. He was obviously very hard grinder. And yeah, just like his ability to perform on various teams, various rosters as well. Because essentially, like, Season 5 Shock is not Season 3 Shock by any stretch, right?
Oh, yeah.
He's the one constant. And the fact how hard Shock dropped after he left is also a good argument for his qualities as like a intangible player. Even like sometimes I feel like you would say it's leadership. Sometimes you just need a heal in the room, or like a counter voice towards like another big voice, right?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, a counter voice. Yeah, somebody who's just gonna, generalship you. That to me, I feel like those are those players that like have those illustrious careers, and sometimes they're just the ones out there just ordering people around, just kind of screaming and keeping everybody in line. And I feel like maybe that was
like sometimes, like when you have an unstoppable force, you are not looking for the immovable object. You're looking for the second unstoppable force, and that's sort of like Shock Season 5.
Probably, yeah, I could imagine. Some weird batch players to kind of mix up. Yeah, I can only imagine. But to me, Yiska, it's not strange. I do agree, Fielder. I think I don't hate that vote at all. But yeah, Season 3, like MVP, the final couple games against Seoul on Hollywood, it's Violet, 2v1s, basically kind of set Shock up for the win. Like, kind of the flex support, like Mr. Clutch, just somebody who it's like, if anybody's going to be there, it's going to be one of these top 5 guys. And more often than not, I feel like if it's not Ana, and again, the Ana hit, let's say, is a fucking big one. I don't know. I still kind of want Violet to be put in those situations. Still think he's him in that way, but yeah, the Ana is a big point. But outside of that, Crimzo, do we think how grade our lists? Are these acceptable in the history of flex supports?
I mean, we all have kind of like different things that we're kind of like looking for in terms of like where we rank the players. I think both you guys, like, it seems like both you guys kind of like knew what you were kind of like looking for, like what you kind of like valued. Like it's obvious that like Yiska kind of like, especially towards the bottom, valued kind of like a longevity.
Yeah.
Because I personally, I would never put myself in a top 10. Like I feel like, to me, like putting me like and not even putting like RuPaul is like insane, because to me, like, yeah, I had a pretty long career, and I didn't achieve anything. And so, like, I was always like a pretty solid player. So like, I would, like, if I were to rank myself, I would literally rank myself at like 18 or something like that. Like, much
I feel like that's humble, and I think that's very respectable. I think there are 2 laws in Overwatch. You'll know if somebody's fucking great if they play on a dog shit team and you notice them, and somebody's worth their shit if they last for fucking they're unkillable. They're like these little zombies that just keep existing. And I think you very much so kind of embody both in some senses, where it's like, I noticed you quite heavily on that Dallas squad where it's like, yeah, it's a struggle. We know shit's internally going. There's a tire fire every other day, but like, it was, you were still like, yeah, okay, but like Crimso's like solid, and like the nades and the stuff, and it's all good. And then the longevity of it, it's like not too many people can kind of last that long, and it's a mark of somebody who's got some success.
I also don't think you were necessary, like outside maybe season 6, you were not picked up because of your westernness, right? Like these other rosters were, you could have, your position could have been taken by a Korean player with relatively little friction for those teams, right? So like you were competing in the market there. I'll tell you, like I was debating before the show, like I had other names in there, like Iris, like even UV, Bedosin, last show, and like those were floating. I just feel like RuPaul, it's fine if, let's say, he plays 2 entire seasons.
Sure,
maybe I
it
feel
is a
better,
time
but
thing, for sure.
especially like in the contrast of how long everyone's careers here are, with the exception of Alarm. Like, it's just hard for me to argue that someone with 1.5 seasons, granted one very good one, should be up there. And I agree that you probably never peaked as high as RuPaul, but like the sheer longevity, like I think it would have been fair for me to like go the last show route, even the Iris route. UV has sort of similar issue as RuPaul has. So yeah, by the way, a name that and I'm interested what you say about him. I feel like if this guy had just like gotten more playtime, Vigilante could have absolutely been, possibly even top 5 from just like the skill set that this guy had, right? Do you agree?
Yeah, I don't know. That guy's such a big question mark because he just never got to play. Like,
Actually,
he was always so hyped up, but he just never got to like play the game. So, I mean, when I watched him, it wasn't like nothing too crazy stood out to me, but like, I'm sure like, if he actually got to like play the game and was like an integral part of a team and was able to like, go through reviews and like, constantly to kind of like work on his kind of play, then he could be like a really great player. But he's probably like the biggest like what if flux sport, I think, definitely, like, but he's just always been on the bench, so we've never really been able to really see him.
Yeah.
Let me throw you a similar question. Any like NA scrim warriors that like never got the call up or were just too young? Like, obviously Cal got a call up. Like, is that a name that you can kind of throw out there? Anybody out there that people really never got to see or just couldn't?
You mean like just in like history, like what I've seen?
Sure, yeah. Like anybody's just like, dang, like if somebody would have just taken a minute to like look at this guy before he either left or was a little too young and kind of aged out. Like any names that you wish we would have seen? Didn't?
I'm not really sure, to be honest, because okay, so when I was like in my early days, like my mindset was everybody's garbage.
Sure.
So it's pretty hard for me to like think back in terms of like who could have been pretty good. So I honestly like I can't really think of anybody that stood out to me too much.
Okay.
So yeah.
I can't really think of anyone. You know who else I was thinking about that I didn't mention? I think Skewed is not too bad of a shout.
I'm so surprised at how good of a brig he ended up becoming.
Right.
Because, I mean, yeah.
Because so for that offseason, like they like Glads wanted to sign me like after they had signed Shu to like be like the second flex sport, right? And then they ended up signing Skewed, and obviously that worked out really well for them because Skewed just developed like an incredible brig, seemingly out of nowhere, because he was kind of like he was like a bottom barrel contenders team, just kind of like coming out of nowhere. But I think Skewed, like this year on Infernal, when I did like watch, he seemed pretty good. Like he seemed pretty solid. Yeah. I think he definitely like was a pretty good player on that team. I want like definitely like curious to see like how he could have played if he had gotten like more playtime. I think this year was pretty good player. I think he has potential. So another interesting like player, I think, too.
Yeah.
what do you think about Gangnam Jin?
That guy's terrible. I'm sorry, but I do not see it. I think people have like the glasses on from like Runaway Days, and I do not see anything about that guy. He's just dumb. I'm sorry.
Yeah, like I think he had like like when Mayhem was briefly good in like season 3, right? Like he was like okay, like he was a good player. But after that, especially after his role switch, holy shit.
That's where I feel like that's one of those system things, because what else do we remember about that Mayhem squad? Who did it have? Oh, who's that? Wait, the crowd's correct. They had the perennial bag getter, Yaki. Now, I don't know if anybody's ever pieced this together, but I've not been very kind to Yaki throughout my years on this stupid podcast. Why? Because he runs it down aggressively, mind you. He just wants to play at this crazy high tempo, and I feel like Gangnam Jin's literally his whole MO on that Mayhem squad was to just run behind Yaki and just nade the floor behind him and then die. And sometimes that works. If you have somebody that's just actually just going to spearhead you. But like, yeah, when you don't have somebody that's like that crazily aggressive and talented, it's not going to work. And then you played main support, to be fair, but that's kind of not on him.
There was a rumor, and I never got to confirm it, but like when Yaki and Kellen first played with each other, like in the first couple of scrims, Kellen was just like really confused what Yaki is doing. Like, why is this guy already tilted? Why is he throwing? And Yaki was just playing his normal game. He was just like fucking running
That's how he plays, man. Yeah.
No, Yaki needs to be in jail. I don't know why that guy is still like around and like has like a insane contract and all that.
I just actually
there is like a thing in NA coaches' heads that Yaki is just like this second coming of Jesus. I remember
he is the I can fix you girlfriend, bro. Like, stop. You can't. It's just how he is.
From my experience scrimming, like he does have like really crazy moments. Like he does have like those moments where like he's just like, oh, he just killed like 3 or killed 4 or whatever. But like, yeah, he has those moments. But like, I'm sorry, but most of the time that guy is just like, I don't know what he's doing. Like he's like just a child walking around in the park. Yes. I don't know what he's doing.
Yeah. He's looking for stream clips at all times. That's how I feel like when I watch Yaki.
Yeah.
I remember like in season 3, like we were playing a ton of Genji, right? And like everyone was just like, oh my god, Sparkle, oh that guy. And then I think like Haksal was still around, like you know, and all these Genji gods. And I remember like interviewing Brad, and we're talking about like all these great Genjis, and he's like, and you know who the best Genji is? Yaki. I was just like, okay, fair. Like, and that was a commonly held opinion at the time. For as my stream disconnects, but I'm still recording. He was a fairly respected player at the time. I think there it was still warranted, and then everyone just chased that ghost of, you know, Yaki being that guy again, and he never could have been, right? Like at some point he was just out of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Undo P. All right, before we get too completely tangential and take up the rest of your evening, thank you again for coming on, Crimzo. If there's anything you wanna final mentions, anything you want to plug, any you know, anything to say as we wrap up the show?
I mean, not really. It's like it's been a long career for me. I think it's time for me to kind of like take like go into like a new direction, not like completely leave behind Overwatch, I hope, but to take a different approach.
Sure.
So that I can kind of continue to work on myself and, you know, think about like what's best for me. I hope that, you know, something happens in the future and I'm able to stick around. But yeah, it's been a great, I think I've had a great long career. I'm happy about that. I obviously, you know, the results weren't quite there, but it is, you know, merit in itself that to have like such a long career, and I'm proud of that. But yeah, I mean, just thank you to everybody that's supported me, and you know, hopefully I'm able to stick around and do something else within the scene, because I still love the game. I love scrims. I love competing always. It's just like playing it right now is just not for me. And I understand that, and I can freeload and I can like get on a team on a bench and do nothing, but that's not how I go. That's not the way that I want to participate in things. So
That's fair.
yeah. So hopefully I'm around for whatever happens next, and you know, we'll see what happens.
All right. Beautiful way to close out a chapter for a lot of things. Yiska, anything coming down for you?
I mean, we're just like waiting for Christmas. I'm 2 weeks off. We have some Christmas content prepared, get ready for the best, the worst, and the most iconic place in Overwatch League history. I realized it's not the most objective list. It's more like, how does it emotionally feel? Okay, like it's like,
you know what he's doing? He's priming you because he fucked up. That's what he's telling you.
No,
right
I didn't
there.
fuck up. I just overvalued pleb sentiments because I could not physically rewatch the entirety of Overwatch League, especially like the big moments and whatnot. So I just polled the community, rewatched some, evaluated the moments that were pointed out. I think, for instance, like the best just basically is no place from season 5 and season 6 in there, which is very likely to be a mistake. But like it also reflects a little bit about how meaning got lost a little bit over the years and how much things used to matter.
Sure.
And then as especially the offline events went away, it decreasingly so felt like, you know, there was real weight attached to those moments. But yeah, like especially the worst moments, there are some physically painful ones in there.
That's some of my favorite Overwatch, man. Shout out to the toilet bowls. Yeah,
sure.
Go for it.
Okay, the last season, season 6, I think it was.
Yeah.
It was on for Glads. It was on Coliseum when Yaki was staring at the enemy translocator instead of going for his own.
Oh yeah.
That was like, that play like physically hurt me. Like, I'm sorry, but I was watching that and I was like, I couldn't watch. Like, it was so bad that like it actually just hurt me. That was like the worst play I've ever seen in my entire life, because not only was he just like not participating in the fight, but he literally had his own ultimate.
Yep.
And he just didn't do anything. He just sat in the back. And oh my, that was like the worst thing I've ever seen.
And while I have you here shitting on other people, what if you had to create the list from bottom? You know, so who is the worst flex support that you think ever made it to Overwatch League? Maybe during your time.
Let me pull up the list on the side. The worst player that I think that joined Overwatch League?
From the list, yeah. I think like we already have some filtering going on in terms of like, okay, I'll tell you who mine is. And I think it's Rolf. I'm sorry, but like that guy, I think he wasn't Rolf like on C9 or something like in 2016.
Yeah. Yes.
And he probably should have been forced to retire by like 2018, okay? Like somehow he held like on and got into that Titans roster and it was shambles. I think they were worse players on the Shanghai Dragons roster in season 1, but like that's during your active time, Jesus Christ, it's crazy to keep around.
Yeah. Oh man, I don't know who like stands out the most. Someone that I never understood. Someone that like I never like understood why like the hype around them was probably Myeon Bong. Because that guy always just, to me, he just always seemed so terrible. Like just sitting like across the map, just doing absolutely nothing. Like nothing with his cooldowns, nothing's happening. He was like on the extreme side of like doing nothing. So like I really just never understood the hype around that guy. But I think, I mean, yeah, there's been tons of like bad players, but I don't think anybody like sticks out too crazy in my opinion.
Yeah, fair. I think we also during this season just got better at picking up the right talent. Right?
Yeah. I'm still trying to think, but like
not too many like starters that were paycheck stealers.
Would you have deserved it earlier to get into Overwatch League?
Me?
Yeah.
I'd say so. I'd say not season 1, but I would say season 2. I mean, there was a chance, but it's just a kappa chance. It was part of like the Florida McGravy apply whole situation. But I think like I personally feel that like it was much harder for me, not just because of like talent, but also just because of like the infatuation of like Korean flex sport players.
Right.
That like there just wasn't any good Western flex sport players. So I feel like that did impact me. But I do think that like I was still like before I played on Envision, I didn't really play on any team, so like I still had a lot to learn. So I was still pretty like new to kind of like competing and all that. So I get like me not being like the best or like earlier on. Maybe I did need that time in contenders to kind of like keep refining my own play to eventually join the league. But I definitely think like looking at the other players like on the rosters, I think I definitely deserve like some sort of chance somewhere. You know?
Yeah. Call that post Jonak depression, right?
Yeah, and like I'm not like for my Dallas season when I had to pick a jersey number, I literally purposely picked the number 20. I think it was 28 because I literally counted every single flex sport that was on in the Overwatch League before me, and that's how many players there were. There were 28 other flex sports before me, and that was partly me being salty because I was thinking like, there's no way that I couldn't fit in somewhere. You know what I mean?
We're in 28, yeah.
Yeah, like so that's kind of some secret lore there, but I mean, I think I deserve to be somewhere. Whether or not, like, I'm not saying I deserve to be like starting on like the best team or anything like that, but I think I definitely could have been like, a role player somewhere.
100%. And it's not like completely unheard of. I think there's a couple of football players that have like little like placards of like all the people that were like drafted above them. That's like, oh yeah. You guys think that these guys are good? Here, let me fucking show you. Like coming in with that kind of chip on your shoulder. That's a powerful thing. It's a tool to hone and motivate yourself. So
yeah, that was back in the day when I hated everybody and I was just really like everybody sucks. I'm the best. But then obviously like as time has gone on, that's like kind of mellowed out.
Sure.
That was definitely like the mindset. I was like, I'm better than this guy. Why is this guy in the Overwatch League, not me, etc.
Did you feel it? You were like, how high did your ego go? Did you think you were like alarm level?
Okay, I'm not gonna lie. I fucking hated when my teammates would talk about alarm because, the talent was never questionable, right?
Sure.
The guy was always incredible. But like in my fixation for hatred, I didn't see it, and like I was like, I hate this guy. I'm gonna be better than this guy. I'm better than this guy. I'm as good as this guy. But like, that's just my own like kind of like mindset. It was like, I have to be better. I'm gonna keep being better. But then actually it's funny because Alarm actually changed the way that I played the game, where he kind of showed me like a new way to play the game of not like, because before I was really aggressive and like I always want to like 5-orb the enemy flex sport, be like, ha ha ha, you suck. But he showed me like a way to play the game that's like, okay, like just have good like think about your positioning, like stay alive for a long time, like have a lot of like kind of like output because you're staying alive for so long, and then like as fights kind of break down, you're able to kind of like do more, right? So he kind of like changed the way that I looked at the game like in that way. So like now obviously I always have respect for Alarm. I think he was like, even when I thought that like he wasn't that good, I always knew that he was the best, and like I never thought like I was better than him ever in my life. Or not logically, but like whenever I had to play against him, it's like I'm Shaq and I'm like knocking on somebody, I'm like, you suck, like, you know what I mean, like, but it's not, it's like it's competitive like emotions. I don't know how to say it. It's like it's not real.
Right. Yeah.
It's the emotion brain, not the logic brain.
Yeah.
I get that. All right. Because I do think that we could keep you here forever. Don't want to. Thank you again. This is 327. We will try our best to come back with another ranking next week. In the meantime, happy holidays. And enjoy the festivities. See you next week.